All right, we'll call the Tuesday, October 22nd Board of Adjustments meeting to order. First item of business is approve the minutes of the August 27th, 2019 meeting. Is there a motion?
So move.
I second the motion.
Okay, motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We'll move on to item 2 on the agenda, new business. 2A is a variance request at 703 and 705 10th Avenue North. I'll turn it over to Maggie.
Good morning. So the variance request at 703 and 705 10th Avenue North is a request of the rear setback. The reason for the request is to allow one set of 2 proposed sets of townhomes on adjacent lots to encroach 13 feet into the rear setback area. The properties are currently zoned MR3 multi-dwelling residential. So in that zone, the minimum required setback is 20 feet, and the applicant is proposing to reduce it to 7 feet. This is the subject area. It's on the corner of 7th Street North and 10th Avenue North. And then the next 2 slides are some drawings that were added in with the application. And so you'll notice that on one lot is one set of townhomes with 3 units, and the units are 2 stories with tuck under parking, and then the adjacent lot has another set of townhomes with 4 units, again 2 stories with tuck under parking, and they would share a drive. And this is just a general elevation and drawing. It might be worth noting that planning staff does not conduct site plan review as part of the variance process. And so it would be the applicant's responsibility following either approval or denial of this variance request to demonstrate that they still meet all other aspects of the LDC as far as dimensional standards go. So that would include building coverage, open space percentages, and so on. Some additional background information. The applicant's name is Nate Anderson, and he's here as well with us today. The intent of the project is to consider this a unified development on the adjacent lots. The reduction of the rear setback would be on that northern property line. And again, it's a request of a variance of 13 feet to reduce the setback from 20 feet to 7 feet. So part of the review criteria, there are 5 findings of fact. The first one, A, is the requested variance arises from conditions unique to the subject property, not ordinarily found in the same zoning district. So each of the lots in question are actually 2,000 square feet larger than the minimum lot size required in the MR3 zoning district. And while the applicant does provide evidence of the city's desire for infill development in the GO 2030 comprehensive plan, increased density in the form of townhomes is actually allowed by right in the MR3 zoning district, so it would not require necessarily a reduction of a setback. At this time, the city is in the process of establishing a core neighborhoods plan, and that plan would ideally create a clearer picture for city staff, developers, and homeowners of what infill development will look like in these established neighborhoods. So granting a variance on the basis of supporting infill development could set a negative precedent for the core neighborhoods and make them vulnerable to development that does not meet the existing LDC standards. So based on that, we would consider criteria A not satisfied. B is that the proposed project will not adversely affect the rights of adjacent property owners. And as practice, staff did send out letters to the surrounding 300 feet of property owners. We received 1 phone call, and that owner did have concerns for parking in the neighborhood. But based on that, staff does find that the reduction of the rear setback specifically would not adversely affect the rights of the adjacent property owners. So that criteria B is satisfied. C is that the applicable standard will not constitute an unnecessary physical hardship because the property could still be used for an otherwise allowed use. So the reduction of the rear setback is not required for the use and enjoyment of the property for residential household living that it's zoned for. 3 townhome units would be allowed to fit as they were drawn under the current LDC standards. And so staff finds that the strict application of the applicable standards will not constitute an unnecessary physical hardship because the property could still be used for an otherwise allowed use, in this case, those townhomes. So C would not be satisfied. Criteria D is that the proposed project will not adversely affect the public health, safety, or general welfare. Staff has no data to believe otherwise, so we would consider criteria D satisfied. And finally, E, the variance is the minimum variance that will overcome the hardship. Based on the proposed drawings, we find that to be true, and so we would consider criteria E satisfied. Now, our recommendation today would be to accept the findings of the staff and deny the requested variance to allow a reduction of the rear setback in the MR3 zoning district on the basis that the criteria of section 200914E1, letters A and C, have not been met. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. And again, the applicant, Nate Anderson, is also here if you have questions for him as well.
Any questions for staff? Okay, we'll hear from the applicant if you wish to address us. Go up to the podium there. Please introduce yourself.
Nate Anderson with Uptown Lofts. Basically, we feel there's a mismatch between the current MR3 zoning and the existing setback lines on the property. With the bonus density that our project is designed to comply with, that would give us about 4.8 units that could fit on this sized property. With the type of units that we feel would best serve the public good in this neighborhood here, as currently drawn, that the units would fit on the property and meet all other criteria, open space requirements and so forth, but the existing current setback lines kind of provide a mismatch with that ability.
Okay, is there any questions for the applicant?
Did you look at any other configurations of how you might fit 7 units on the lot?
Potentially, we had explored the possibility of actually requesting 2 variances, moving the properties forward, but that ultimately decided not to go that route. I think the 2 variance approach is less likely to be approved and would kind of mismatch the neighborhood and existing multifamily properties that are currently set back from the street.
Or 6 larger units.
Yep, correct. That's going to be our plan moving forward if this is not approved.
Do you, what's the width of the overhangs on it? Do you have that information? It just seemed like, I was looking at the 703 that has the 4 units on it. And even though this request is just for a rear yard variance, it looks like you would also need a building coverage variance as well, because I believe it's gonna be over 35 feet, so. I don't know if you looked at that or not, or sorry, over 35%.
Oh, sure, yep. No, we're going to make sure that we meet all open space requirements.
Yeah, I'm saying building coverage. Open space is 35%, but building coverage is 35% as well.
Right.
Any other questions for the owner or staff? No? Anyone want to make a motion? Or is there any discussion?
I'll move to accept the findings of staff and deny the requested variance to allow the proposed addition to encroach into the required rear setback area in the MR3 zoning district on the basis that the review criteria of section 20-0914 E1, A, and C have not been met.
I second the motion.
All right, there's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? I'd just like to comment that, I mean, I'm going to support the motion because, I mean, I look at And you're looking at a 7-foot rear yard setback, and I look at all the other zoning districts, and that, I mean, the absolute minimum rear yard setback, I think, is 15 feet. So, I mean, that's kind of meant, that's in there for a reason, to kind of buffer the property from the rear. This one is a little bit unique because it's like the rear of this butts up to the side of another property, but still, and in light of, you know, the ongoing core neighborhood study, I'm a little hesitant to, you know, set a precedence like Maggie had mentioned. So those are my comments. Any other discussion? No? Please call the roll. So just to clarify, the motion is to accept the staff's findings and deny the requested variance.
Wendell Dobb,
Yes.
Ford Dunker,
Yes.
Mitchell,
Yes.
Love.
Yes. So you have the ability to appeal the decision to City Commission, which I'm sure you're aware of. All right, we'll move on to item 2B, which is a little bit of a unique item. So this is an appeal of a land management plan for 430 22nd Street South. So we have Mr. Scott Ludo.
Chairman Love, members of the board, thank you very much. Scott Ludall, City Forester. Just going to go through a few details, and then at the end, open it up for some questions and some discussion. Part of Chapter 11 requires property owners to maintain their lawn at 8 inches or less. However, these requirements do not apply to a property where they have been issued a land management permit through the Forestry Department. Really, it's just an opportunity for property owners, if they choose to do some kind of alternative landscaping, grasses, flowers, whatever. They have an opportunity through the permit to do something different other than the traditional Kentucky bluegrass. And it does allow them for some of the plants to grow larger than 8 inches in height. The process itself, the applicant needs to submit a written plan and a map identifying what parts of their property they intend to landscape. Description of the plants, maintenance and management techniques that'll be utilized. They're required to have a 4-foot buffer strip adjacent to neighboring properties unless it's waived. Does not include city right-of-way, typically the boulevard between the sidewalk and the curb. There's a 200-foot mailing to adjacent property owners after everything's been reviewed to give them an opportunity to appeal. Part of the permit also mentions that they need to agree to have it mowed or cut if they're instructed to do so. On August 28th, owner Rebecca Heidi at 430 22nd Street North or South submitted an application for a land management permit. After review, the permit was approved by myself on September 13th, and right after that, the 200-foot mailing went out. On September 18th, the owner of 429 21st Street South, Brenda Slatum, submitted a written appeal. And October 7th, I met with both parties, trying to address some of the concerns and put together a supplemental agreement, really, that both parties signed and agreed to. It was really just a way to kind of mediate whatever differences that they needed to try to solve. And so that part was successful. So your packet includes the supplemental agreement, the permit application from Ms. Heidi, the map and the plan, the information that I sent out to the adjacent property owners. There was 35 of them, I believe. You've got the written appeal from Ms. Slatum, and also Chapter 11, the related ordinance for the land management permit process. So, questions? Comments?
Questions for staff?
I'm just curious how this fits under Board of Adjustment and exactly what are we
So
acting
this,
on?
oh, sorry. So this is treated as like an appeal of an administrative decision. So the staff decided to issue a permit, someone appealed it, so it comes to us as, so we are to review it, similar to our last meeting where we're to review it as if we're the city persons or city staff member issuing the permit. So, you know, really what we're trying to decide is, did Scott err in issuing the permit? Did he not follow some requirement or something like that?
Okay.
And then there's really, I mean, Scott and I had discussed this a little bit, but So the permit was originally issued, you know, they got an appeal from a neighboring property. Scott then went to try to mediate the issue and got both of them to sign the agreement, sign a supplemental agreement. So I had kind of asked, well, is the appellant willing to, you know, withdraw their appeal? They feel that due to the lack of work that has happened on it, progress that's happened on it, they weren't willing to pull their appeal. They're not here to support their appeal. At least I don't think so, no. So, I mean, really, we're just to review this, like Scott mentioned, the ordinances are in here. So we're to review it as if we were the city staff reviewing the permit application and determine if he was correct in issuing the original permit, so.
The supplemental agreement isn't actually part of the process, but like was mentioned earlier, it was just an attempt to mediate whatever differences needed to be worked out. And some of the parts of that agreement didn't even apply to grass. It was other aspects of the property that needed some attention.
Sure.
So Scott, when I look at, you know, section 110809, which seems to kind of be the requirements of issuing the permit, I mean, the key things in there, you know, there's the buffer strips or the kind of the setbacks from the public right of way and adjacent property lines, and I see that that's, I mean, in the original permit, that's noted in bold there, so I mean, I think that's all met. As far as all the other requirements for submitting the permit, I mean, it seems like everything's in order to me, so.
Can I make another comment?
Yes.
Mr. Chair?
Sure.
As long as the property owner stays within what their plan is, then this permit stays in place with the property. There's a handful of examples around town. The biggest one is Microsoft has a land management permit in place. That's a large property. And there's a few single individual ones speckled here and there.
So if the property owner doesn't follow the land management plan as outlined in the supplemental agreement, then the permit is retracted?
Then environmental health can go in and require that the landscape be maintained, usually by traditional methods of mowing.
Sure. But that wouldn't be the same as returning it back to a grass lawn, or what you'd be doing is just cutting the plants down to 8 inches.
Yep. They have to maintain the grass at that height or less, and the weeds. And so at that point, like I say, yes, they would get involved.
Is this something then that you will monitor, or then do you just wait for, say, another neighbor to complain about it, or how do you follow up on whether they're following up on the permit?
Typically, it's at least a 1-year inspection is how I handle it. And there's so few around that we deal with. It's fairly easy to correspond with the property owner and make sure that they're abiding by that permit.
Scott, is it fair to say that the neighbor kind of more related to nuisance conditions than the actual land management plan?
Yeah, and appearance of the property as well. And the supplemental agreement, most of those have already been completed with the volunteers around the perimeter that have been cut down. It did get mowed, the backyard did get mowed. Some of the plants were moved away from that east property line adjacent to Brenda's property. The east side yard, they were doing some mulching and some planting. That's been completed. And then a large pile of brush that was behind the garage. I haven't verified it, but property owner says that is gone. And so, yes, more of a nuisance and appearance thing.
Okay. Any other questions? If not, is there a motion?
I'll move to support the approved land management plan permit and the supplemental agreement as presented.
Okay, is there a second?
A second.
All right, any discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Mitchell,
Yes.
Ford Dunker,
Yes.
Wendell Dobb,
Yes.
Love.
Yes.
Thank you.
Item 3 on the agenda is other business. I see none, so is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I
Opposed, same sign, and we're adjourned. Thank you.